This talk is taken from a chapter that was published this spring in a collection of essays titled In Search of Wonderful Ideas, Critical Exploration in Teacher Education. The talk is in two parts. In part one, I review the context for the study. In part two, I describe an experiment in teaching where I redesigned a teacher education course to engage students as learning researchers rather than as teaching technicians. The call for deeper learning. An interesting thing is happening. There's convergence among leaders in education, business, and industry that schools should go beyond academic minimums to prepare graduates as innovators, collaborators, critical thinkers, communicators, and problem solvers. Why? The most in-demand jobs of today did not exist 5 to 10 years ago. Rapid advancements in technology have resulted in task shifts, and employers now look for graduates who, in addition to having academic content knowledge, demonstrate the so-called 21st century skills: creativity, complex thinking, collaboration, and problem solving. These task shifts also have economic consequences, with widening the income gap between students who have education of this nature and those who do not. All students, not just a select few, must experience a new kind of education. As Ted Dintersmith indicates, absent profound change in our schools, adults will keep piling up on the sidelines, jeopardizing civil society. And there are other storm clouds: climate change, environmental degradation, and COVID-19, as we now know, has revealed systemic inequities across all sectors of society. As John Dewey observed in 1897, 100 years ago, it is impossible to foretell just what civilization will be 20 years from now. So to prepare students for the future means to give them command of themselves. It means to train them so that they will have full and ready use of all of their capacities. So what is deeper learning, and what is its relationship to the 21st century skills? This is the question that the National Research Council sought to illuminate when they organized the Committee on Defining Deeper Learning. The committee, chaired by James Pellegrino of the Learning Sciences Institute, published its final report under the heading Education for Life and Work: Developing Transferable Knowledge and Skills in the 21st Century. The report asserted the hallmark of deeper learning is helping students understand the general principles underlying specific content. When describing the 21st century skills, the committee members concluded that it's by engaging students in the deeper learning that aims at understanding, that they develop the 21st century competencies. The committee asserted that teaching for deeper learning requires presenting learners with challenging tasks, encouraging elaboration, questioning, and explanation, and assessing what students are understanding and learning throughout the entire learning process. So what is the status of deeper learning in K-12 settings in teacher education? In 2010, researchers Hal Mehta and Sarah Fine set out on what became a 6-year study of American high schools. Under the banner Good Schools Beyond Test Scores, they visited break-the-mold schools across America that had a reputation for innovation. These schools claimed to be teaching for deeper learning, using things like project-based learning to develop both academic content knowledge and 21st century skills. In Search for Deeper Learning, the quest to remake the American high school, released in 2020, they reported on their findings. While there were some bright spots, the researchers present what they describe as a gap between aspirations and reality. Teaching for deeper learning is not easy, even when it is the goal. Meta and Find identify 3 qualities which, when they intersect over time, nurture deeper learning. These are places in which students have opportunities to build up skill and knowledge in the domain, and they come to understand the structure of the field or the discipline. There are also places in which students have opportunity to move from taking in someone else's ideas to having opportunity to act on or make something within the field. They call this creativity. And third, there are places in which students have opportunity to generate and make personal connections to the field. They call this identity. Preparing teachers to teach for deeper learning is a matter of equity and economic and educational justice. To examine deeper learning in teacher education, researchers Linda Darling-Hammond and Jeannie Oakes examined 7 teacher preparation programs with a reputation for training teachers to use deeper learning pedagogies with strong equity tools in their teaching. Their analyses of these programs revealed a deep structure and coherent grounding in how children learn and develop, with an insistence that the opportunities for such development be available to each and every teacher. During my years as a teacher educator, I taught in a teacher licensure program. Students were pursuing undergraduate degrees in mathematics, history, etc. But they also had aspirations to teach in the public school system also. As the comment shown here of Michelle, a mathematics major, indicates, many students enter this course viewing teaching and learning as a transactional process in which teachers are content experts who deliver content knowledge to students. This transmission view appears rooted in students' own experiences as learners in high school. It is a view that is prevalent among teacher education students. It is a conception, however, that is challenging to dislodge and runs contrary to what we know about how students do learn for understanding and the view of teachers as learning facilitators. So my pedagogical challenge as a teacher educator then is to nudge students of teaching from these technical and transmission views of learning and teaching toward a conception of teaching as creating environments that facilitate learning for understanding, and to create opportunities for students of teaching to learn about practice in practice, to teach about teaching in ways that reflect how people do learn and build understanding, and to create for students of teaching the same opportunities for deeper learning that I hope they will create for their K through 12 students. Part 2, a small experiment in teacher education. In this experiment, I reorganized, redesigned, and reconceptualized a teacher education course I was teaching to engage my students as learning researchers practiced in critical exploration in the classroom methodology. Students conduct 2 sets of learning studies. In the first set of learning studies, they follow their own learning closely as they explore phenomena that I present to them. Phenomena might be mirrors, pendulum, paintings, light and color, a poem. And in a second set of learning studies, students document the learning and sense-making of volunteer learners they have recruited as the learners explore phenomena that they present to them. Students typically engage volunteer learners with the same materials that they have explored together themselves in class. They appreciate that as learning researchers, their charge is not to direct or take the learner's learning to a particular place, but to observe how people do learn and how they are building a sense and understanding of the phenomena. This work requires sustaining learners' explorations by selecting materials that extend their own spontaneous explorations and which also connect to the subject matter. So how did this course redesign impact students' understanding of learning and teaching? I'm going to present some quotes from students that I extracted from their field notes and other reflective writings that they generated over the course duration. The first quote here is from Ian, and Ian is noticing the importance of materials, choosing the right materials that connect with students' interests and activities, and learning from observing what the students do with materials. That, says Ian, is a very big idea that I will take away from this course. The second quote is also from Ian. This quote is 4 weeks later, and he writes, "I'm seeing that exploration broadens the topic. People learn by asking questions and experimenting with ideas that people in the group bring up." Ian says that he noticed that with the learners that he worked with and also in his own group in the class as they were exploring pendulums. The third quote is from Darian, and Darian notices the importance of collaboration. And she writes, at the beginning, she had a very different view of what learning and teaching and learning actually is. She was one student that really resisted working with others in a group. She wrote, though, learners discover their own ideas by collaborating with and questioning others. That was a big idea for Darian. And questioning to understand and explore learners' thinking. This student, Michelle, now the mathematics major, 4 weeks into the course, Michelle, of course, is the student who believed that it's the teacher who presents, it's the teacher who explains. Now, says Michelle, I now see the role of knowing the right questions to ask that will help further the student's understanding. This is nothing that I have experienced before in my own learning in high school. She continues, a good teacher shows respect for all of their students' ideas and opinions and can use her knowledge to help students explore their own ideas and thoughts. Communication. She writes, I can see how individuals can construct their ideas and explore an idea, communicate with each other, and get a better understanding as a whole. So again, at the beginning of the course, Michelle talked about teachers having strong communication skills. And now she sees it's students communicating with each other, through sharing their ideas, that students get a better understanding as a whole. 8 weeks into the course, she writes, an educator can achieve insight into student understanding by observing, listening, and talking with students as they work through complex problems. This is not at all how I used to see the relationship. And this quote is from Ariel, a student who was highly skeptical of what she called the whole approach in the beginning, but in the end she concludes, pendulums, and I would say her thoughts about teaching and learning, were not simply a topic and abstract idea. They became a very concrete reality which I was able to explore and assimilate to my thinking in my own way. This made it significantly easier to retain. I learned because it came from a process and experiment that I built for myself. And so, for the reasons that I list on this slide, I conclude critical exploration is a true pedagogy for teacher education that nurtures deep learning for students of teaching and for the students that they will someday teach. Thank you for listening.